Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. Alex, up on the site, go check it out at sportstalkatl.com. You wrote an article about the coaches that it's basically your do not hire list. I want you to take me through some of those candidates.
Yeah, I would save some of the more obvious ones first, and then I'd save the best one for last, or at least the one I feel most passionate about. The two guys first are internal candidates, and it's Ryan Nielsen and Jerry Gray. I see a lot of Falcons fans talking about how they would love if Ryan Nielsen just got hired, replaced Arthur Smith, kind of have that continuity on the defensive side of the ball. Jerry Gray also on the defensive side of the ball. Guys, this is nonsense. I love Ryan Nielsen as much as the next guy. He is a primary catalyst in the defensive turnaround. Now, obviously, personnel plays a big factor. I would argue a bigger factor than Nielsen, but the guy's a first-time coordinator. Though he succeeded in his first season, all of a sudden we're going to give this guy the keys to the kingdom. There's a big difference between being a coordinator, being a head coach. Being a head coach, you're kind of like the CEO of a company, whereas, if you're just a coordinator, you don't have to delegate as much. So Nielsen and Gray wasn't even a coordinator. So, I mean, all of this stuff, though Jerry Gray he has more NFL experience than I think I've been alive. So I'm not trying to say that, you have to have a ton of experience. I think that both of these, Jerry Gray hasn't gotten head coaching consideration for a reason. I think Ryan Nielsen could potentially in the future, just not right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wrote about it in a separate article, but yeah, I think Nielsen, if he continues to trend in this direction, whether he's the defensive coordinator remaining in Atlanta or if he's somewhere else, I think maybe next year, maybe the year after that, he'll definitely start getting consideration. I mean, there's no doubt he did fantastic things for the Falcons. And honestly, whoever they bring in, it would be awesome if he was able to stick around. He was one of the few real bright spots this year. But yeah, it's nonsense talking about him as a head coaching candidate right now, especially for a team like the Falcons, where this is a pivotal hire, guys. Like, I'm not saying they need experience, but Arthur Blank and Rich McKay really can't afford to get this one wrong. I mean, you're talking about a team that hasn't been to the postseason in 6 years, coming off, 3 straight 7-10 seasons. And as we all recognize, there's now some talent on the roster and cap space to spend. They cannot afford to get this one wrong.
Yeah, the timelines don't match up, and that theme is consistent with this next guy, Brian Callahan. If you watched yesterday's show or you saw it on the YouTube, if you haven't, go check it out, Sports Talk ATL. You know how I feel about Brian Callahan. He's the Bengals offensive coordinator, except he doesn't call the plays. Zach Taylor, the head coach, calls the plays. And without Joe Burrow, they've been semi-pathetic this season. And though they've had some bright moments with Jake Browning, more often than not, it's still just Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, they're guys just being dudes. And a lot of the time in Cincinnati, that's all it is, even with Zach Taylor calling the plays. So I hate the idea of hiring a coordinator who doesn't call the plays, whether it's offensively or defensively. Coordinators who do not call the plays cannot be trusted. Now, if it's a special teams guy, a la John Harbaugh in Baltimore, that's a whole different story. But offensive coordinator, you want his offensive mind. You want a guy who is the guy in the building.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here. We talked about that yesterday. Brian Callahan should not be a serious option here.
And this one might ruffle some feathers among our listeners or watchers, however you're ingesting us. It's Todd Monken. The guy has done nothing but succeed at every stop along the way. He's a favorite around here in Atlanta because of the work he did in Athens with Georgia, back-to-back national champions. Everybody knows the resume. Went, pretty much took Stetson Bennett from a walk-on, a very forgettable quarterback, to a guy. I mean, one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history is what he let Stetson Bennett. And now he's doing the same thing with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, an MVP candidate. He's tailored offenses to his guy. And I love the idea of him potentially being an offensive coordinator in Atlanta. I don't want to say that, but the idea that he's going to jump from, offensive coordinator in Baltimore, which is one of the most structured places in sports. I mean, Baltimore is just tip-top, world-class organization. Todd Monken doesn't have to do anything but worry about the offensive game plan week in, week out. John Harbaugh is the one who's the CEO, pulling all the strings. Asking Todd Monken to take over the entire ship is a big ask. I think people aren't realizing how big of a task it is to be a head coach in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, this one is the only, not the only one. I have to hear the rest of this. I would push back a little, simply just because it's intriguing, and I do think Monken is the kind of guy that you want in the building to coach that quarterback. But as you said, I mean, there's no doubt there's some risk. It kind of feels like the Falcons don't want to take that kind of risk. As we just said, they can't really afford to get this one wrong. They either have to get an experienced guy or someone that they really have a lot of faith in if it's a first time guy. But I will say, Monken's at least interesting, and there's no denying his offensive pedigree and what he's been able to do. And he's kind of almost proven to be a little bit of a quarterback whisperer. And that's definitely something the Falcons should be looking for. But I do agree with you on the fact that, you're asking a lot of them and it could turn out to be a disaster. And do you want to take that kind of risk in such a pivotal hire? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw with Arthur Smith. He was an offensive guru in Tennessee, number 1 overall seed some years back with those Titans, came here, kind of fell on his face. So, if the moment's too big for some of these guys as a head coach, they'll piss down their legs. I mean, it happens time and time again. This next guy hasn't had the success away from, the nest, and so to speak, like Todd Monken has. And it's Eric Bieniemy. And this has nothing to do with anything personal, because the guy is reportedly, he's a brash personality, gets into arguments. This has nothing to do with that. This has everything to do with the production of Sam Howell and that Washington offense. Sam Howell threw a ton of interceptions. The Commanders' offense was not balanced at all. They passed way too much. Sam Howell ended up getting benched. I mean, I don't know what people keep seeing and saying in Eric Bieniemy, and the craziest thing to me is using the Chiefs' failures, or they're not even failures. Let's just say the Chiefs' underwhelming offense as a point for Eric Bieniemy, that he was the reason why Patrick Mahomes. No, look at the Chiefs' offense from when Eric Bieniemy was there versus when he's left. The personnel is night and day. And Eric Bieniemy, he might be a great guy. I don't know. I don't care. I just watch football on Sundays, and the Commanders' offense was poo-poo.
Yeah, I don't think Eric Bieniemy is a seriously head coaching candidate. I know people have brought him up so many times on Twitter and YouTube. I haven't seen him get an interview yet. Maybe that changes. I just don't even think he's a serious head coaching candidate. I mean, he went he left the nest, like you said, went to Washington, and he sucked. And I've watched some Commanders games, man. Like, even some of the stuff he was drawing up, it's like, bro, you have a terrible offensive line and a bad quarterback, and this is the longest developing play of all time. What the hell do you think is going to happen? He's going to get sacked or he's going to throw a pick.
Yeah, and sometimes the league is full of idiots, but sometimes the league gets it right. The reason why he's had all of these interviews, he's interviewed probably close to 24 times, interviewed with Atlanta back in 2021 before we hired Arthur Smith. The reason why he probably hasn't gotten a head coaching gig is because, 1, he sucks at interviewing, or 2, he's just not a qualified head coach. There's no secret. Like, when
it came out that he was a terrible interview. Like, not just from the Falcons, but from other sources as well. Like, the Falcons, from a report, I can't, think of who was it from. But excuse me, the Falcons wanted to hire Eric Bieniemy. They wanted that to be their guy. He was just a terrible interview, and it just got crossed off the list. And I'm sure a lot of teams felt that way. I mean, you're right there underneath Andy Reid's wing and stuff like that. You're like this apprentice and something like that. Well, look what you did in Kansas City. Like, everyone was hoping to get this guy as their head coach. Yeah. There's a reason they passed up on him.
Yeah, people wanted him to be like, if you could hire the next Andy Reid, you'd have a line out the door for Eric Bieniemy. Now, going to the final one, my last one, stay away. It's the biggest name, the GOAT, Bill Belichick. I don't know where to begin. He's 72 years old. He hired Matt Patricia, a defensive coordinator, call offensive plays, the personnel decision-making. I don't know where to begin. I hate it all. In an ideal scenario, he comes in, doesn't have personnel decision-making power. That's still Terry Fontenot's job. He somehow convinces Josh McDaniels to come here, who also has a brash personality that doesn't really mesh, which would, I think, with Rich McKay and Arthur Blank. And then we get a couple of successful seasons. Bill Belichick breaks Don Shula's record. He's 75 years old, goes, it's time to hang it up. And we're doing this whole song and dance 3 years, 3 years from now. I mean, I don't see the long-term vision with Bill Belichick coming to Atlanta.
I agree. Listen, Bill Belichick's not my favorite one. I will play some devil's advocate. He is the GOAT, hypothetically speaking, and I think this is going to be the case. I don't even know if he's technically, hell-bent on having – I think he might recognize that the personnel decisions that he's made in New England and stuff like that have been a mess. I think, and we talked about how Dan Graziano, I think, reported it, how people around the league also feel like this is a match on Belichick's end as well, which is a little bit surprising without a quarterback. But he gets to come in, have his input and say, which is not a bad thing. But he does have a guy in Terry Fontenot who's proven to be fantastic, and Kyle Smith has proven to be really good, who can recognize and scout and help him out on that end. And I think those are guys that Bill Belichick might respect. And if that's the case and it's a tag team effort, there's no denying that Bill Belichick is one of the greatest coaches in history. And he hasn't lost that, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Those Patriots defense, they're not littered with talent, but they are very good. And at the very least, it's intriguing. So listen, I'm with you. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense because you're basically giving yourself a 3-year window to win a Super Bowl. And I just can't even imagine the moves that are going to have to be made to win a Super Bowl with this current roster, even though it's in a decent shape. But it's best case, I wouldn't hate to see it just simply because it's like I said yesterday, it's a movie that I would like to watch.
Listen, I hate everything about it, and I don't want to argue with his football IQ, his defensive acumen. I mean, post Tom Brady era, the defense hasn't, missed a beat. But let's not forget, there were some defensive lapses. The reason why they lost the 2017 Super Bowl against the Eagles, does anybody remember that? Belichick's defense gave up 1 billion points to the Eagles. So he's not infallible. Like, he has missteps, and the defense has failed at times. Now, more often than not, he's got that side of the ball, under wraps. It's all locked down and key. I get all that. This guy doesn't hire outside of his circle. So the coordinators that you've seen in New England are the coordinators that you have to pick from in Atlanta. And offensively, the only one that's even semi-interesting is Josh McDaniels. And I don't really know if I love Josh McDaniels. I mean, maybe the game's passing him by too. I just think that, it's such a short-term answer to a long-term solution. And unfortunately, Arthur Blank probably doesn't care because I don't know how many more years he's got. He's 82 years old. He wants to win right now, tomorrow. So it's unfortunate. This is the direction we're trending, I think.
Yeah, I mean, every report that we've seen, everything has pointed to Bill Belichick being the top candidate. But I'm interested to see, and we're going to go on the other side after the break and give our head cut because it's not all negative. There's some good guys out there. We're going to talk about them after the break.